The red marker hit the whiteboard at 11, saw 47 p.m. No one was supposed to be watching. The building was empty. The engineers had gone home. The problem they'd left behind, 3 days old, $500,000 deep, bleeding red across every screen on the 42nd floor, was supposed to wait until morning. It didn't get the chance. A man in a gray uniform stood alone in the conference room, mop in the corner, marker in his hand. Moving across the board like he'd seen something the 20 people before him had walked right past. He had. Somewhere above him, in the dark of the same building, a woman in a charcoal suit sat very still, watching. Her tablet lit up. Numbers ran, the red lines on the screen began to straighten. She didn't move, she didn't speak. She just looked at this man, this invisible man, and understood that everything was about to change. He didn't know she was there. He was just fixing something broken. That was all he ever did. Before the city woke up. Before the coffee shops unlocked their doors and the highways filled with headlights and the whole machine of Atlanta started grinding onward again. Marcus was already moving. Alarm didn't go off. It never needed to. His body knew. Had fun for 4 years. Ever since the hospital. Ever since the drive home alone with a car seat in the back and a 6-month-old who didn't understand why Mama wasn't singing. He moved through the apartment quiet. Practiced quiet. The kind you develop when someone small is still sleeping and you'd rather cut off your own hand than wake them before they're ready. The cheap kind. The kind that tastes like ambition gave up halfway through. He stood at the kitchen window while it brewed, watched the street below. A man walking a dog that clearly did not want to be walked. A woman in scrubs moving fast, head down, already somewhere else in her mind. Marcus understood that. Being somewhere else while your body went through the motions. He'd done it for years. Not in a sad way, just in a surviving way. There's a difference. Not everyone knows that, but coffee finished. He poured 2 cups. One for him. One he set on the counter still every morning before he remembered. Then moved it back. 4 years and he still did that. Some habits don't know they're supposed to stop. He heard her before he saw her. The small thump of feet hitting floor. The shuffle. The pause, all 3-second pause, Naomi always took, like she was consulting some internal checklist before committing to the morning. Then she appeared in the doorway. 6 years old. Hair loose and enormous. Wearing a t-shirt that said future scientist across the front and mismatched socks. One purple, one with tiny yellow stars. That she's absolutely chosen on purpose. She looked at him. He looked at her. You made the face, she said. What face? The one we put up 2 cups. He glanced at the counter. Didn't answer. Naomi walked to the stable and climbed into her chair with the focused determination of someone scaling a small mountain. Pulled her orange juice toward her. No pulp. Always no pulp. She was very serious about this. Daddy, if you know something is wrong, she paused, took a sip, considered. Nobody asking you. Is it still your job to say so? He looked at her over his coffee cup.
Where'd that jar from?
Pay 12?
Doesn't stop.
Just for a second. The kind of stop that doesn't show on the outside but rearranges something on the inside. You've been reading it? You said I could when I was ready. She met his eyes. Steady. I'm ready. Marcus set down his cup. Looked at his daughter. 6 years old and already asking questions that most people spent 40 years avoiding. Yeah, he said finally. It's still your job. You must get mad. Especially then. Naomi nodded. Filed it away somewhere. Returned to her orange juice like the conversation was complete. It was. She always knew when a conversation was complete. He dropped her at school at 7:43. She hugged him at the gate, quick, fierce, the way she did everything, and then turned and walked in without looking back. That was new. The not looking back. She'd started doing it 2 months ago. Like she'd made a private decision that walking forward meant walking forward. That turning around was a different thing entirely. He watched her until she disappeared through the door. Then he drove to a job that paid $12 an hour and required him to be invisible. He was very good at it. Apex Systems occupied 4 floors of a glass tower on Peachtree Street, 42nd through 45th, the kind of building that caught the sun in a way that made it look important from the highway, which was probably the point. Marcus came in through the service entrance. Always had. Side door, badge scan, nod to the security guy named Darnell, who worked the same overnighter to morning shift, and always had a crossword folded in his breast pocket. Morning web, morning, 14 across, 9 letters, historical boundary. Darnell didn't even look up. Marcus pointed at him. Kept walking. He had a system. Had all wheels as had a system. Floors 4043 first the engineering labs because they generated the most chaos and the chaos needed the most time. Then 44 and 45 at the end of the shift when the early arrivals started trickling in and he needed to be done and out of their way. Invisible. That was the job. Not just the cleaning. The visibility. He'd gotten good at it. Frighteningly good. The kind of good that means you start to wonder if you're invisible everywhere. Not just here. Not just in this building with its keycard locks and its gated lunches and its conference rooms named it after jazz musicians. But that was a thought for 3 a.m. Not now. Now he worked. He pushed a cart down the hall on 42. Stopped at the engineering lab, looked through the glass panel in the door. The lights were still on. That was wrong. The lights were on a timer. Should have switched to low power at midnight and gone off at 2. He checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open, wrote his cart on a far from our side and walking the way he always did. Spray. White move. Don't think about it. The work caused the kind that can come to meditative if you let it. Most nights he let it. He was almost at the whiteboard when he stopped. He hadn't meant to look at it. Wasn't looking for anything. Just his eyes went to it the way your eyes go to a word misspelled on a sign. You're not hunting for it. But you cannot see it once you see it. The formula was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not obviously wrong. The kind of wrong that lived in a structure, underneath the symbols, in the logic that held everything else together like load-bearing walls in a house that looked perfectly fine from the outside. He stood there. 2 minutes. 3. He was not supposed to be doing this. This was not his job. His job was the spray bottle and the cart and the professional-grade invisibility. But he thought about page 12 of Joseph's journal, which he hadn't read, which Naomi had apparently read, which apparently contained the exact right question at the exact right moment. So if you know something is wrong and nobody's asking you, is this your job to say so? He picked up a red marker from the tray, set it back down, picked it up again, started writing, not frantically, not performing, quietly and carefully the way he fixed things. The way he'd always fixed things, with focus, without audience, because the thing being fixed was what mattered, not the boots can hunch on the fixing. Yes, he segment, redrew it. Circled 2 variables that had been swapped in a way that looked intentional but wasn't. Underlined a node that had been weighted wrong, not by much, but in a non-linear system, not by much compounded fast. Like a small crack in a foundation, small than not. He stepped back, looked at what he'd done, nodded once to himself, the way he always did, and when something clicked into place. Not heart pride exactly, more like recognition. The feeling of a thing being what it was supposed to be. He set the marker down and heard a voice. Not a question. He turned. She was standing in the far corner of the room, not at the door, in the corner. Like been there for a while. He hadn't seen her because the lamp by the windows threw its light in the wrong direction and the corner was shadow, and he had not been looking for anyone because who expected anyone to be there at midnight in a conference room in the dark? She was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car. Hair natural, pulled back precisely. No jewelry except stud earrings, no softness in her face. But her eyes were doing something complicated that her face was too trained to show. I wasn't. He stopped. Started again. I'm not trying to interfere with anything. I just saw something. Off. She finished the sentence. Calmly. The way someone finishes a sentence they already know the end of. You saw something off. Yes. You study this? He looked at the whiteboard, then back at her. Once. But she didn't respond to that. Instead, she pulled a trap or flopsy. He hadn't seen it there. It appeared like she'd manifested it. And she was typing before she said anything else. He watched her. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't calling security. She was running numbers. Like that was the most unnatural thing in the world to do when the janitor wrote on your whiteboard at midnight. The tablet made a soft chime. She looked at it. He looked at her. Marcus, up. How long have you been working here, Marcus Webb? 5 years. Five. She said it like she was calculating something. You've been in this building 5 years, yes? What floor do you start on? The question surprised him. Not the question itself, the specificity of it. Like it meant something. 42. But then 43. Then the top floors before the shift ends. As in 5 years, this is the first time I've touched anything, he said. Because it was false. Because it seemed important that she know that. She looked at him. Really looked. The kind of looking that doesn't happen much in regular life. Most people, when they look at you, they're waiting for their turn to speak, or they're deciding which category to put you in. She wasn't doing either. She was just looking. Conference room A, she said finally by tomorrow. I drop my daughter at 7:45. Then I'll have someone at your door at 7. The tablet disappeared back into her coat. She likes orange to apple. He stared at her. Orange, he said. No pulp. Done. She picked up her bag from the chair he hadn't noticed. Moved toward the door. Paused. For what it's worth, you didn't step on anyone's toes. No one was in this room. She glanced back at the whiteboard. No one was looking. She left. Her heels on the tile went quiet in about 4 steps. She walked like someone who had decided where she was going before she stood up. He stood in the empty room, looked at the whiteboard, looked at the door, looked at his cart in the corner. Right, he said to nobody. He finished mopping floor 42. He didn't sleep. Not because of nerves, exactly. More like too many things running simultaneously in a brain that was supposed to be quieting down. He left on his jack in the dark and thought about Josephine. Thought about page 12. Wondered what else was in that journal that Naomi had read. Wondered why a 6-year-old who barely knew her mother through photographs and stories had decided she was ready to read her words. Naomi was always ready for things Marcus hadn't even seen coming. Just like her mother. Around 2 a.m., he got up, went to the closet. He knew where the journal was, always knew, on the shelf above the winter coats, in a shoebox with a rubber band around it. He'd put it there on purpose, accessible without being unavoidable. He sat on the edge of the bed with it in his hands for a while. Didn't open it. Not tonight. Tonight he just needed to know it was there. That she was there somehow in the weight of it. He put it back, laid back down. Eventually something like sleep. 6 instances of system. The most instance in something. This is knock of someone who'd been told to be somewhere and was there, professionally, without apology. Marcus answered it, still buttoning his shirt. A woman in an Apex Pulso shirt, holding a paper bag and 2 cups in a carrier. Efficient. Already halfway through a mental checklist he wasn't on. Mr. Webb, I'm from the executive office. She crouched because Naomi had appeared from nowhere, materializing silently his hip the way she always would. This must be Naomi. Naomi looked at the bag. Is that breakfast? Orange juice, no pulp, scrambled eggs and toast. The woman straightened, and there's a car waiting downstairs to take her to school whenever she's ready. Naomi looked up at Marcus. He looked down at her. Fancy, she said. Daddy. She tugged his sleeve. Your pocket is boring. She disappeared back into her room and returned 5 seconds later with the small green snows, and she kept it on her windowsill. Shoved it into his breast pocket, patted it twice. For luck. Also for the boring pocket. Thank you. Don't lose it. It's from the park by the lake where Mama used to go. He looked at her. She had already moved on to inspecting the paper bag. Some things she knew. He didn't know how. She just knew. He kissed the top of her head. Let the driver take her. Watched the car until it turned the corner. Then he went back inside, looked in the mirror. Button-down shirt, the good one, no visible stains. Dark pants. No tie because he didn't own one. And also because showing up in a tie would have felt like wearing a costume. He was not going to wear a costume. He was going to go exactly as himself. That would be either the right call or a disaster, possibly both. He touched the stone in his pocket, went to work. The conference room A was on the 44th floor. Glass walls, long table. Chairs that probably cost more per unit than his monthly rent. The view was the Atlanta skyline doing its morning thing. Golden haze and the distant geometry of other buildings full of other people having other problems. Marcus had cleaned this room 300 times. He had nested in it. He sat at the chair nearest the door. Not the head of the table, not the center, the edge. Caught the quiet of seats, who left quickly if leaving becomes necessary. He was the first one there. People arrived. Suits, mostly. Tablets. Lanyards. The particular kind of energy that fills a room when people know the stakes are high and everyone is pretending they don't. He watched them not look at him. Not aggressively. Just their eyes moved past him. Characterized him. Filed him somewhere that made the rest of the morning make sense and then moved on. He was used to it. He watched Terrence walk in, and that was a different thing. Terrence looked at him directly. Fully. A long look that said everything without saying anything. And then he sat 3 seats down and opened his laptop. And then, the room changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way temperature changes when a front moves in something in the air, a pressure shift. Everyone in the room adjusting
Interesting.
slightly without knowing why.
The door opened.
Diane Okafor walked in. Charcoal suit again. Different one, same severity. Hair still pulled back but 1 degree more precise than the night before, which he wouldn't have thought possible. She moved to the head of the table and she didn't settle in the way some settle authority, spreading out and claiming space. She was just already there, like the room had been waiting for her to arrive and now it could begin. She looked at him once, brief.
Direct.
Said, I see you, I know why you're here, that's settled, we can move. Then she looked at everyone else. 3 SEC said, no thank prim parole, no good morning, 6 meetings, 17 engineers, 500,000 in consulting fees. I want to know what we have. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. Terrence. He cleared his throat. The predictive loop is still throwing inconsistencies across. I know what it's throwing. I read the overnight report. Her voice was calm, surgical. What I'm asking is why. More silence. She tapped her tablet once. The white board at the end of the room lit up, projected digital, showing exactly what Marcus had drawn the night before. His handwriting, his corrections, his red circles around the swapped variables, his underline on the misweighted node. The room stared at it. Someone identified the issue for last night, Diane said. I ran a simulation on the correction at 11:53 p.m. Accuracy up. Error rate down significantly. Want to talk about implementation? Terrence looked at the board, then at Marcus, then back at the board. Who, Mr. Webb, identified the error. She said it without ceremony. The way you say a fact. The way you say the capital of a state. The room looked at Marcus. He did not move. Marcus Webb, Diane continued. He'll be working with some technical observation going forward. He's the sun stopped themselves, someone else. Didn't. With respect, Terrence said, and it was the specific coin phrase that answered its own dishonesty. One overnight correction doesn't run it, Diane said. Excuse me? Run the model with the correction now. In front of the room. Terrence looked at her, held the look for exactly as long as he could, then typed. The simulation ran, smooth, no overfitting. The predictive behavior aligned across the test sets like something finally clicking process for a long time being slightly off. The green bar glowed. Still could be luck, Terrence said. Marcus looked up, quietly. If it is, he said, maybe we ought to be smart enough to learn from luck when it shows up carrying a mop. One person coughed. It might have been a laugh. Terrence looked at him. Something moved behind his eyes, not quite anger. Something more complicated. The look of a person who recognizes something they want to. Diane didn't smile, but something in her face settled. Implementation plan by end of day, she said to the room. Meeting adjourned. She found him near the elevators. He'd been heading for the service exit, old habit, the invisible exit, and then her voice came from behind him and he stopped. Mr. Webb. He turned. She was holding 2 coffees in cardboard cups. Extending one, he took it. You held your own in there. I wasn't trying to hold anything, I just what seems true. That's exactly what holding your own looks like.
They walked.
Or she walked and he matched her pace, which was not slow. She moved like a person for whom time was a resource with no replenishment option. Do you always think like that? Like what? In plain terms. Like you're explaining something to someone who doesn't need to be impressed. I talk to my title like she has a person, she fixes it, but I talk to her like she's a person, so I guess it carries over. Like was quiet for a moment. Do you always, he stopped? What? Talk like you're running a deposition. She looked at him sideways. I manage what I can control. Most people can't control conversations. I'm not most people. No, he said, I can see that. They reached out. He stopped. Your daughter, she said. Naomi, yeah. Page has 12. He looked at her. You heard that? I was in the room. I heard that everything. Slowly. Of course she did. She didn't miss things. He was starting to understand that about her. She's reading her mother's journal, he said. I hadn't read it myself. Not all of it. Diane looked at him, not with pity, just with attention. The specific kind of attention that means someone is actually listening and not composing their response. He thought about the shoebox on the shelf, the weight of it in his hands at 2 a.m. I think I was waiting until I was sure I could hear it, he said, without it breaking something. And now, I don't know yet. He looked toward the door. My daughter got there first, so maybe I need to catch up. Diane looked at him. Her face did the complicated thing again. The thing that lived underneath the suit and the precision and this meeting is adjourned energy. Something that looked a lot like recognition. See you tomorrow, she said. I'm on nights, I know. But tomorrow morning, conference room A, you'll be listed as technical observer. She turned, paused. The stone in your pocket. He touched it without thinking, she asked. She asked me at the end of the week. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Then she was gone. He picked up Naomi at 3:45. She was waiting at the gate the way she always waited. Not jumping up and down, not running. Just standing there with a power hook on both shoulders and her eyes on the middle distance. Like she was thinking about something important and was willing to let him interrupt. She climbed into the car, buckled herself out, said not for 30 seconds. Daddy, yeah, did they see you today? He drove, watched the road, thought about the room with the green bar glowing, thought about the lobby, the coffee, almost smiles. Some of them. Which ones? The one that counts. Naomi absorbed this. Is she nice? He glanced at her. What makes you think it's she? Because you said it like it was complicated. She looked out the window. Men aren't complicated to you. You like men, fine. Women make you think harder. He stared straight ahead. 6 years old. He's a full voice, 6 feet finally. Quietly, she made me think harder. Naomi smiled, still looking out the window. I know. Page 8. He didn't ask what page 8 said. Some things he needed to hear when he was ready. Not before. Daddy. Yeah, baby. The stone worked. He touched his breast pocket. The small weight of it. The green stone from the park by the lake where Josephine used to walk on Sunday mornings was still quiet, and the light came through the water oaks at an angle she said made her feel like the world was showing off. Yeah, he said. I think it did. They drove home. The city moved around them, loud, rushing, enormous. But inside the car it was just them. And that was, as it had always been, enough. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for the word to spread. Not through any official memo. Not through an announcement in the all-hands meeting. But through the particular underground current that runs through office building in America. The one that carries information faster than email and more accurately than Rua. The janitor fixed the algorithm. Marcus heard it the way he heard most things. Second. Sideways. In fragments. A technician he'd never spoken to nodded at him in the hallway. Really nodded. The kind with eye contact and tension. Not the absent half-foot people gave when they needed to acknowledge something without committing to it. DJ Calloway, 27, sharp eyes. Natural hair pulled into a puff that she touched when she was thinking. Stopped him outside the lab on a Tuesday morning. Hey, right? I wanted to ask you something. About the loop correction. She had a tablet in her hand. Angled it toward him. I've been looking at the secondary feedback channel and I think there's something similar happening, but smaller. Like an echo. He looked at the screen. She was right. Not about everything, but about the echo. Walk me through what you're seeing, he said. And she did. And he listened the way he always listened, fully, without interrupting, without nodding along prematurely just to seem engaged. He waited until she was done. Then he said 3 sentences that reframed the entire problem. Deja stared at the tablet. She stopped. Why does that work? Because the model is learning from its own corrections instead of the original data. A student who memorizes wrong answers and calls it studying. She looked up at him. He shrugged. My daughter does it with spelling tests. She memorizes the red marks. Doesn't help. Deja laughed, surprised herself with it. Nero put something down and walked back into the lab faster than she'd come out. That was Tuesday, but by Thursday she'd sent him 3 questions by internal message. Which was notable because Marcus did not officially have internal messaging access. He was a technical observer. The title was real. The infrastructure around it was still catching up. Diane's assistant had quietly set up an account anyway, which Marcus did not ask about, and which Diane did not explain, which was starting to understand exactly how she operated. The lunch happened on a Wednesday. Her idea, her suggestion. Delivered through her assistant a 3-line mail on calendar invite crossed with the course. Mr. Webb, Miss Okafor requests your availability for a working lunch Wednesday. 12:30. A private dining room, 45th floor. Please confirm. He confirmed. Obviously he confirmed. He also spent approximately 90 seconds wondering what a private dining room on the 45th floor of a corporate tower looked like. Then not to think about it, because thinking about it would make him nervous, and he did not have the bandwidth for nervous. It looked like a regular room, smaller than he expected, 1 table, 2 chairs. A window with a view that Atlanta had clearly been practicing for. She was already there when he arrived. No laptop, no tablet, no phone face up on the table. Just her. And 2 plates of food that someone had brought in and arranged it and disappeared from, all without him seeing any of it happen. Sit, she said. She poured water. He watched her hands. She had the hands of someone who had done physical work at some point in their life, and then spent decades doing different work, but the earlier work left a mark. Something in how she held things deliberately. "There's something tell about Morehouse," she said. Not what he expected. About it. Specifically, machine learning and adaptive systems, with a secondary focus on neural architecture. He picked up his fork junior year. I was 3 semesters from finishing. When Josephine got sick, he looked up. She met his eyes, not flinching. "I read your HR file. The original application as you had considered knife in school for a family interest emergency. The file 4 years ago had a notation bereavement leave 1 week named Josephine Webb. You kept that file. I keep all the files." A pause. "But I read yours this week." He didn't know what to do with that, so he cut into his food instead. It was good. Really good. The kind of food that required people who knew things he didn't know. She was diagnosed when Naomi was 6 months old, she said. Because she'd read the file, and that meant she already knew most of it, and there was something about Diane Okafor that made partial truths feel like a bad investment. Ovarian cancer, fast-moving. We had 14 months between diagnosis, and he stopped. 14 months. I'm sorry. I know people say that and don't mean it. You say it like you mean it. I do mean it. She set down her fork. My husband Raymond died 4 years ago. 8 days after I signed the largest contract of my career. He had a stroke. She looked out the window. He called me 3 times that afternoon. I didn't pick up. I was in a closing meeting. The room was very quiet. I didn't know, Marcus said. No one does except Calvin. She picked her fork back up. Like the telling of it was a task she'd completed and could now set down. He was a structural engineer.
Raymond.
Used to say that the most important part of any building wasn't the height of it. It was the load path. Where the weight goes when something pushes back. Marcus looked at her. He would have liked you, said simply. He would have sat in that conference room and applauded what you did to that whiteboard, and then all followed you out and talked your ear off for an hour. Marcus almost smiled. The good ones are always like that. Yes, she said it quietly. They are. And the silence that fell wasn't the silence of 2 people who didn't have anything to say. It was the silence of 2 people who said something real and were giving it room. He didn't check the time. He couldn't remember the last lunch where he hadn't checked the time. He didn't notice the shift at first. That was the thing about Terence Boyle. He was surgical about it. No confrontations, no memos. Nothing that could be pointed to in a disciplinary meeting or a paper just touch. The engineers who had nodded at Marcus in the hallway stopped nodding, not rudely. They just became busy whenever he was nearby. Urgent tasks, eyes down. The invisible gravitational pull of not now. The internal messaging thread Deju had been sending him went quiet on a Thursday afternoon. He messaged her once. She responded 2 days later with a single line. Sorry, swamped. Talk soon. She sounded careful. He understood careful. He'd been careful his entire career here. Careful was the armor you wore when the building wasn't built for you. You knew it, and you decided to work there anyway. Because $12 of us of holders in his doors and needs it into the shoes that fit. But this was different careful. This was the careful of someone who had been warned. Didn't say anything. No, Diane. What would he say? People stopped nodding. The change. Exactly how that sounded. Then the article dropped. He was picking up Naomi from school on a Friday when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it, buzzed again. Then a message from a number he didn't recognize. Have you seen this? With a link. He didn't click it until Naomi was in the car and buckled and deep into describing something that had happened at recess, involving some assistance in a resolution that apparently required a formal vote. He clicked the link at a red light. The headline read, Inside Apex Systems, Can a Janitor Save $1 billion AI? He read 3 lines, put the phone face down on the seat. Naomi paused mid-sentence. What happened?
Nothing.
You made the face. What face? The one where someone is telling me. There's an article here, said finally.
About what?
About me. Yes.
Is it bad?
He thought about the 3 lines as he'd read. The way they were written, not hostile, exactly. More like the particular flavor of curiosity that came with a raised eyebrow. Look at this unusual thing. Look at this man who doesn't belong in this room. It's not bad, he said. It's just, he stopped.
What?
It talks about me like I'm interesting instead of like I'm right. He glanced at her in the mirror.
There's a difference.
Naomi thought about this with great seriousness. Like how when I do math fast, some kids say wow instead of also learning to do math fast. He stared at the road. Yes, he said. Like that exactly. But that's annoying. It is. What are you gonna do? Keep doing the work, he said. Same as always. Turning Satan said sort of some sorry he drove. So it's on Talos and Ozoville and they'd been a move. He found the journal on a Saturday, not on purpose. Or maybe on purpose without admitting it was on purpose. Sometimes those were the same thing. He'd been looking for a winter coat. The temperature had dropped overnight, and Naomi had a field trip Monday, and her coat from last year was definitively too small. There was no argument to be made for it. The sleeves ended at her forearms, and she had opinions about the cold. And he was digging through the closet shelf above the winter coats, because that was where things accumulated in his apartment, but the waste of wind wasn't accumulated at the bottom of a river. The shoebox was in the back. He'd put it there deliberately. 4 years ago, in the first week after. When the apartment was full of people bringing food and he needed one in one place that was only his and only hers and only theirs. He stood on the skills with the shoebox in both hands. Then he sat down on the closet floor. He didn't know he was going to open it. And then he did. The journal was on top, spiral bound. The cover was blue, not her favorite color. She'd said once that they'd bought it because blue was calming and she needed to be calmed when she wrote. And there were stars of us on the dark sounds remarker that had mostly faded now to a shine you could only see at certain angles. He turned to the last page. He didn't know he was going to do that either. And then he read it. Her handwriting was the same, which was, he hadn't expected that to land so hard. Of course it was the same. But something in him had expected time, kept changed it somehow. Like grief should have altered even the things it couldn't touch. Her handwriting was the same and her voice was right there in it. Marcus will do great things, not because he's the smartest person in the room, because he's the most honest one. He doesn't know that about himself yet. He thinks being honest costs too much, but he's wrong. It's the only currency that compounds. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried he'll spend the rest of his life believing he has to earn the right to cap space. Like he arrives somewhere without a ticket and has to stay near the exit just in case they figure it out. Baby, you were always supposed to be in the room. You were always supposed to be at the table. Someone along the way told you otherwise, and you listened. And I've been trying to untell you for 6 years. Keep untelling yourself. Do it for me if you can't do it for you yet, and do it for her. She's watching everything. She's on the floor for long, didn't move. Naomi's voice came from the hallway. Daddy, did you find the coat? Yeah. His voice came out steadier than he expected. Give me a minute. Okay. A pause. Are you in the closet again? Just looking for something. He looked at the journal in his hands. Yes, said Day he called Dija, not through the internal system, his personal phone. He had her number from the Tuesday. She'd flagged him down in the hallway. She'd written it on a post-it note with the words, "Call me if you find anything interesting," which he'd thought was confident for someone who'd known him 40 minutes. She picked up on the second ring.
Hey.
Hey, he matched it. You okay? Pulse. The kind that had weight.
I've been talking.
It wasn't explicit.
It was more like temperature. Yeah, breath. Yeah, exactly. He understood. He did not make her say more. I want to walk you through something, he said. The secondary feedback channel you flagged. I've been thinking about it, and I think you were right about the echo, but I think the source is earlier in the pipeline than we were looking. Silence.
You want to do this now? 3 hours? That's a longer pause. Then,
Yeah, I have 3 hours.
they talked for 4. He sat at his kitchen table with a notepad, actual paper. It thought better on paper. It's always thought better.
Better on paper, and walked her through everything methodically, not rushing, not performing. The way he'd always taught himself things, by explaining them out loud until they became solid. Deja asked good questions, the kind that pushed back instead of agreeing, the kind that made him think harder. He'd always liked that. By the end, she'd 3 pages of notes and he'd filled most of the notepad. Marcus. Her voice was different now. The careful had eased out of it. This is going to work. It should work. No, I mean this is going to actually work. Like fix the contract problem work. He looked at his notepad. You'll need to present it. With you. I don't know, he stopped himself. Started and again. Present it however you need to. I'll be there if you need backup. A pause. Why won't you just, cause the room will hear it better from you right now. He said it plain, without bitterness. That's just the truth of the room. Use it. She was quiet for a moment. That's not fair, she said. No, it's not. He picked up his coffee. Do it anyway. Beans came on a Wednesday at 11:23 p. Asleep. Almost asleep. The kind of almost where you're 90% gone and then a sound brings you back and suddenly you're fully awake and the noise feels louder than it should. His phone screen lit up. He looked at it from the pillow. Didn't move for a moment, then picked it up. From HR Apex Systems. Subject update to technical observer engagement. He sat up. Read it. 3 paragraphs of careful corporate language that said, in its efficient and bloodless way, effective immediately, technical SARS observer arrangements, suspend FARs and internal restructuring. His janitorial position remained available should he wish to continue in that capacity. They appreciated his contributions during the evaluation period. He read it twice. Put the phone down on the nightstand face down. Looked at the ceiling. The apartment was very quiet. The specific quiet of the middle of the night in a city that never fully goes quiet. Sirens at a distance. The hum of the refrigerator. The soft sound of Naomi breathing in the other room through the wall. He did not feel the things he expected to feel. Not anger. Not the sick drop of humiliation. Not the burning clean feeling of justice that he felt when the swing set votes were rigged. He felt tired. And then, underneath the tired, something else. Something that sounded a lot like Josephine's voice. He got up, went to the closet, took the journal down. Turned not to the last page this time. Turned to somewhere in the middle. Found a page at random. He thinks making himself smaller protects the people around him. That if he stays near the edges of rooms, nobody has to adjust. Nobody has to rearrange themselves to make space for him. He does it out of love. I know that. But love that make you disappear is still disappearing. He stood there in the dark closet. Then he got the notepad from the kitchen, sat at the table, opened to a fresh page and wrote, Joe, she signed the paper. And I think I understand why. Scared people do scale down things. They make the smallest possible move to get through the next hour. I've done it too. I've been doing it for years, making myself small so no one has to adjust. You saw it on it. I don't want to be small anymore. I don't know what that looks like from here. But I don't want to be small. He closed the notepad. He did not go back to sleep. At 6 a.m., he called Dija. Left her for voicemail. Walked through the next stage of the secondary feedback solution. Slowly and clearly. In enough detail that she could forbid from him. Because she needed to know. Because there was bigger than his position in it. Because Josephine said the only currency that compounds is honesty. And the honest thing was, the work mattered more than whether Marcus Webb was in the room when it happened. He ended the voicemail, made coffee, opened the door to Naomi's room and watched her sleep for a moment. Her arm was around a stuffed dragon. Her mouth was slightly open. Her hair, as completely from whatever it had been in the night before, was now fully surrounding her head like a halo made of curls. She was so much her mother, and so much herself, both at once. He pulled her door quietly closed, stood in the hallway. He didn't know what came next. He never had. He'd never been the kind of person who knew what came next. He was the kind of person who showed up, who kept the hands moving, who fixed what was in front of him and trusted that the next thing would become visible when it was time. It had always worked. Eventually, he went back to the kitchen, sat with his coffee, let the morning come. Calvin Ossie had been with Apex Systems for 19 years. He'd hired Diane when she was a VP and he was least TO, and she was the most terrifying interviewee he'd ever sat across from, not because she was progressive, but because better than the panel asking him, and they all knew it. He'd watched her become exactly who she had always been on her way to becoming, and he'd watched the last 4 years slowly turn her to stone. He found her on the fourth floor at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, late enough that most people were gone. She was sitting at the window with a glass of water she hadn't drunk, and the particular stillness of someone who had been very busy and had just stopped and wasn't sure what the stopping was for. He sat down, uninvited. They'd been past invitations for a decade. He's gone, he said. I know. You signed the paper. I know that. He didn't say anything for a moment. Let it exist. DJ Calloway submitted a technical brief this afternoon, he said then. Based on the secondary feedback issue Webb identified. It's Calvin, it's good, it's really good. If we implement, I know, Diane, I know, Calvin. She sets the glass on and turned from the window. Her face was not what he expected. He'd expected closed. Miss Machine, the marble quality she developed since Raymond. She looked tired in a human way. Not the tired of overwork, the tired of carrying something heavy for too long. I made the wrong call, she said. Because I was scared and I dressed the fear up in risk management language and I signed the paper. What are you going to do? I'm trying to figure out if I'm going back for the company or for him. A beat, and I need to know the difference before I knock on that door. Calvin looked at her for a long moment. You knew Raymond for 7 years before you married him, he said. Yes. Took you that long, How's finally no. She almost smiled. The real one. The one she'd had before. He fixed my car in the parking lot of a conference in Memphis without me asking him to. I came out at the end of the day, and my engine wasn't making the sound it had been making, and he was just standing there, like he'd done a normal thing. Calvin nodded. Fixed because they're showing off, and some people fix things because they can't help it. She looked, and he picked up his briefcase. Dude, you've always known the difference, Di. You've just been too scared to trust it. He walked out. She stood by the window for a long time. Then she looked down at her desk, at the paper she'd signed. The stain near the edge, barely visible, from his first day. His apology. Anything mustn't soften to help measure. She's almost wiped it away twice, both times. She stopped. She pulled a piece of paper toward her. Not a legal document, not a memo. A regular sheet of paper. She wrote his name at the top, then a number, then an address below that, which she'd had since the day she'd sent breakfast, and hadn't let herself use until now. She folded it once, put it in her coat pocket, and didn't talk herself out of it. The letter arrived at A-Bank on a Friday afternoon. The girl brought it upstairs to herself, didn't use the mail system, came up to the 44th floor and handed it to Calvin's assistant and said, this was hand-delivered from Mrs. Okafor, from a child. Calvin's assistant, who had seen many things in 19 years, looked at the envelope. Purple crayon, careful uneven lattice, to Miss Diane. She brought it to Diane's office, knocked open the door. This came for you and delivered yet. She set it on the desk. It's from, the handwriting suggests someone very young. Diane looked at the envelope. His assistant left. Diane sat for a moment, then picked it up, slid a finger under the seal gently, like whatever was inside might be fragile. Inside was one folded sheet of paper and a drawing. The drawing first. 2 adults standing looking up at a night sky full of stars. Between them a small figure, a flash lighting the way. Then the letter, unfolded. Dear Miss Diane. Daddy stopped humming. He hums when he fixes things. When he fixes the sink and when he's thinking about a problem and when he's making dinner and when he doesn't know I can hear him. He hasn't hummed in 8 days. I counted. I think you have something broken that only he can fix. But he won't go somewhere he's not wanted. That's the rule he made after Mama died. He said we don't go where we're not wanted anymore. We used to and it hurt. I think. You just forgot to say so. He needs to fix things to feel okay. I think that's true for you too, Naomi Webb. Age 6 and 3/4. Diane read it once. Then again. She was in the elevator with her coat on before she'd made any conscious decision to move. The elevator went down, 44 floors. The doors opened on the lobby. She walked through, out into the Atlanta evening. The air had the specific quality of early winter in the South, cold for feel real, soft enough to still surprise you. She stood on the sidewalk. Then she walked to the parking structure, got in her own car, not the company car, her own car, the one she drove on Sundays when she had nowhere to be, and typed an address into her phone, an address she had memorized and tried to forget and not succeeded in forgetting. She drove. The city moved past the windows, golden gray and the long amber stretch of the streetlights on a Thursday evening. She did not call ahead, but she was afraid for that. She called, didn't think of a reason not to go, and she was done. She was so done with thinking of reasons not to go. Raymond had called her 3 times. She had not answered. She was not going to do that again. She parked on the street, got out, looked up at the building. Ordinary. 4 stories. Brick that needed repainting and windows with mismatched curtains and a buzz at the panel by the door with some of the name labels. Fee. She pressed the button, waited a crackling sound. Then a small voice. Who is it? 6 years old. Diane closed her eyes for 1 second. It's Miss Diane, she said. Naomi, I got your letter. A pause. Then very clearly, with a particular satisfaction of Atlanta coming together, the buzzy was the board mesoplot on a Wednesday, not Friday, not after the semester 4. Diane had scheduled it that way on purpose, because if she was going to put Marcus in front of 500 investors, she needed the room behind her first. She needed the board to be a settled thing, not a live wire she was managing from a distance, while also trying to make sure a man she'd wronged had everything he needed to walk into the biggest room of his life. So, Wednesday, 10 a.m., 45th floor, 7 board members, Calvin at the far end, the sun falling in front of him particular to mean something. Terrence, nobody mentioned it, but everybody noticed, and the noticing itself said most of what needed to be said. Gerald, who had been the board chair since before Diane had her first VP title, and considered this a form of authority he was meant to find reassuring, folded his hands on the table and looked at her. She did not wait for him to speak first. The CDB loop solution has been fully implemented, she said. Preliminary results are running 12 points ahead of projection. The Federal Contract Committee has agreed to reconvene some technical review next month. She looked around the table. I want to talk about staffing. Gerald, we're listening. Marcus Webb, real staff. Not observer, not consultant. A position with scope, authority, and a team he builds himself. She said it without softening the edges. And Deja Calloway as lead technical engineer, effective immediately. A pause. One of the members, younger, newer to the board, the kind who asked questions designed to sound like concerns, said, Sassy optics uses this is the right moment to the optic I'm concerned about. Diane says, is a company to do that finds the solution to its biggest technical problem and then sends them home because it arrived in the wrong packaging. She looked at him directly. That's the story I don't want written about us. That's the liability. Jones then Salvin said, I'll second some motion. Looked around the table. 2 members nodded, then a third, then the younger one, slowly, like he was completing a calculation. Any nothing. Then we proceed. Gerald clicked his pen. The title. His to define, Diane said. That's part of the offer. She left the meeting at 11:14 a.m., took the elevator down, not up, walked through the lobby, out the front door, got in her own car, drove to an apartment building on the east side of the city, where the elevator had a handwritten sign that had been there long enough to start curling at the edges. She took the stairs. Her heels was on the concrete. 4 flights. Each one announcing her in a way she wasn't used to. She knocked on 4C. Naomi opened the door in approximately 4 seconds, which meant she'd been standing right behind it. You came back, Naomi said. I said I would, but she said a lot of things. She stepped, come in. I'm in the middle of something. She was always in the middle of something. Diane stepped inside. The apartment smelled the same as the first time, coffee underneath everything, and the particular warmth of a space that was lived in fully, without apology. Books on the counter, drawings taped to cabinet doors, work boots by the entrance, lined up straight. Naomi was back on the floor before Diane had finished looking around. The east wing of the Lego city had expanded significantly since the last visit. It was becoming genuinely complex. Naomi moved through it with the confidence of someone who had a plan she hadn't shared with anyone. Daddy's at the library, Naomi said. He goes when the apartment gets too small. I know, says Diane sat on the floor. No hesitation this time. The trousers were already acquainted with this carpet. Does he know I'm coming? No. Naomi handed her a piece without looking up. South wall needs reinforcing. Diane took the piece, found the right slot, pressed it in. Naomi rejected it with a slight nod. They built for a while. City side was doing its midday thing, deliveries. A dog being walked by someone who looked like they had somewhere to be and had forgotten the dog operated on a different schedule. Mims, Diane. Yes, sis. The last time you were here, you and Daddy talked for a long time after I went to bed. She placed a piece carefully. He didn't hum that night either. But the next morning he was different. Different how? Like he was thinking about something that wasn't heavy. She looked up. Usually when he thinks hard, it looks like carrying something. That morning it looked like building something. She returned to her work. That's better. The building kind. Diane looked at the piece in her hand. She thought about Raymond, about the conference in Memphis and the parking lot, and an engine that stopped making the sound it had been making, about how she'd filed that memory under man who was good with his hands, not man who was paying attention to what you needed before you said it. She had spent 4 years being very efficient at misfiling things. Can I tell you something? She said. Naomi looked up. What? Anyway, he came here because the board approved Marcus. He has a real position now, a real team. Starting Monday. She sat down. But I also came because I needed to see this place again. This she looked around, the drawings, the boots, the shoebox on the high shelf that she now recognized for what it was without being told. This is what I keep building walls to keep out. Naomi was very still. I don't want to keep doing that, Tyson said. I don't know how to stop entirely, but I'm trying to learn. A pause. Naomi picked up the yellow piece, the one she'd been setting aside since Diane's first visit. Considered for a moment, then placed it, center of the east wing. It didn't match anything around it. It was completely wrong by every structural logic, and it was exactly right. That's the piece that makes it real, Naomi said. Daddy says a thing isn't yours until you put something impractical in it. She looked at Diane. You can stay till he gets back. Oh, I was hoping you'd say that. I know. Naomi went back to building. That's why I said it. Marcus home at 2:44 p.m. His key in the lock. Pause on the other side. She could picture it. Him seeing the unfamiliar shoes. Processing. Deciding. The door opened. He looked at Naomi first, then at Diane. Naomi did not look up. Hi, Daddy. The board did the thing. South wall is on now. Marcus set his bag down by the door, stood there for a moment in the particular way he stood when he was taking stock of a situation before committing to a direction. Then he sat on the couch. Diane got up from the floor, sat in the chair across from him. Naomi kept building. The board voted this morning, Diane said. You're on real stuff. A team you build yourself. Budget you define. Scope you define. She held his gaze as a single engineer. He was quiet. I want to be clear about something, she said. Because she had learned, in the hours between board meeting and these stairs, that there was a version of this solution she could give and said all the right things. And there was a true version. And she was done offering the clean one when the true one was available. This isn't fixing what I broke by handing you something valuable. It's not. It's the comp finally saying what was true the night you picked up the red marker. She let it sit. I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry I made it take this long. He looked at her. The apartment was quiet. To Naomi's hands moving through Lego pieces with a soft click-click rhythm that was somehow both present and discreet. You signed that paper, he said, not as an accusation, as a fact that needed to exist in the film before they could move past it. So, yes. Under pressure. Yes. And I knew it was wrong when I did it. I dressed the up in risk management language, but it was fear. She looked at her hands, looked back up. I've been afraid for 4 years, since Raymond. I got very good at turning fear into distance, into the kind of efficiency that looks like strength from the outside. I know what that looks like, he said quietly. I know you do. She held his gaze. What I did cost you something that wasn't mine to take. And I'm asking you, not instructing, asking to come back. He was quiet for a long time. The city moved beside the window. A bus? Someone's radio. The particular sound of a Wednesday afternoon in a neighborhood that didn't stop for anyone's internal reckoning. There's something I need you to understand, he said finally. Oh, Josephine wrote something in her journal about how I make myself small so no one has to adjust, how I stay near the exits. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Slowly. She called it disappearing. She said love that makes you disappear is still disappearing. Diane was very hysterical. I've been disappearing my whole career, at Apex, everywhere, because if I felt safer. Because if I stayed invisible, nobody could tell me I was in the wrong room. He looked up, and then I picked up a red marker and I stopped being invisible for about 10 minutes. And everything moved. It moved, Diane said quietly. I don't want to go back to invisible. He said it plain. Not as the demand. As a fact about himself he'd recently come from and was now presenting as a non-negotiable piece of the lens von instinct. If I come back as someone who's supposed to be there, with full standing. Or I don't come back. You are supposed to be there. You've always been supposed to be there. You're sure? I have been unsure since 11:53 p.m. on a Tuesday when your correction ran a simulation and the wrong engineers as clear that they've been solving so far the wrong problem for a year. She held his gaze. I was also scared. Those two things led to me at the same time. I'm sorry the scared one won. He looked at her. Long enough that she didn't feel silence. which was, for Diane Okafor, still one of the harder things she'd learned to do. Then he nodded, once. The way he nodded when something clicked into place. Okay, he said. In Monday, 7:30. Conference room A, 7:30. A pause. Smaller than the ones before. Diane? Yes. Any more papers about me without talking to me first. I promise you. He looked at her for one more moment. Then he looked at Naomi on the floor, who had been very busy minding her own business for the past minutes, in a way that suggested she had been listening to every word. You hungry? He said to both of them. Naomi looked up immediately. Yes, obviously. Diane looked at the window, then back at him. I have a 4 o'clock call. It's 2:53. She reached into her coat, silenced her phone. Put it back. What are we making? She said. Naomi stood up and brushed Lego dust off her knees. I'll supervise. She walked into the kitchen like she'd been waiting for exactly this invitation for exactly as long as trouble. She probably had. Calvin found Terence on Thursday morning, not in his office. The parking structure, 3rd level, sitting in his car with the engine off.
Which was either deeply symbolic or just where he'd ended up when the building stopped feeling like somewhere he could walk into.
Calvin got in the passenger side. Didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked through the windshield at the concrete pillar in front of them. How long have you been out here? Calvin said. About an hour. That's a long time to sit in a parking garage. I know. A silence. The board voted yesterday, Calvin said. I heard. Marcus's Webb is on staff, full standing, his own team. Terence still looked at his hands on steering wheels. Good, he said, and he meant it. Calvin could tell he meant it, which was the thing about Terence that had always made this complicated. He wasn't a bad man. He was a man who had made a series of decisions from inside a fear he'd never named out loud. I've been thinking, Terence said.
About month 3. Calvin waited. Month 3 of the data project.
When I first saw the numbers weren't clean. Hair. Long. Sloss, I told myself it was within acceptable range. I told myself the outcome justified the method. I told myself a dozen things that sounded reasonable enough to sleep on. He looked out the window. And then a man who cleans floors at night looked at the same problem for 5 minutes and saw it clear. No agenda, no position to protect. Just, what are you going to do? Calvin said. Terence reached into the back seat, pulled out a folder, set it on the dashboard. Full documentation, he said. Everything I signed, everything I knew and when I knew it. And an email to the full technical team with Marcus' name on every solution that came from his input. Everyone they scrubbed. Everyone that was his and got filed on someone else's initiative. Calvin looked at the folder. That'll cost you your position. I know. Terence looked at him. I've been paying for it since month 3 anyway. At least this way the debt goes somewhere real. They sat for another moment. Then Calvin picked up the folder. I'll make sure it goes to the right people. Terence nodded, got out of the car, straightened his jacket, walked toward the elevator, not rushing, not performing. Just a man walking somewhere he needed to go. Calvin watched him go. Then he looked at the folder in his hands, called his assistant. Clear my 11 o'clock. Opened the car door. Tell Deja Calloway 50 minutes with her this afternoon. He had a few things to make right.
Starting now.
The investor was Thursday evening. Grand ballroom. Peachtree Marcus. The kind of room that had been designed to make people feel like what happened inside it mattered. High ceilings. Good lighting. Chairs that cost more per evening than most people's grocery budgets. Marcus stood backstage at 6:48 p.m. as shirt pressed. No tie. Naomi had been extremely on the tie when he'd held one up that morning and had looked at her for a second opinion. She'd said, you don't wear ties. Wearing one would be a lie before you even start. He'd put the tie down. She'd nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose counsel had been correctly received. In his breast pocket, the green stone from the park by the lake. The folded piece of paper Naomi's drawing, the dragon in the maze, the one that didn't know what it was capable of. He could hear the room through the curtain. 500 people. The particular sound of a crowd that expected something and wasn't sure what. The hum of anticipation mixed with the clink of glasses and the rustle of programs. He'd spoken in front of people before. Not like this. Not in a room with this much money in it. Not as himself, fully, without the invisible buffer of a role that explained why he was there. Tonight there was no buffer. Tonight he was just Marcus Webb, which was either going to be enough or it wasn't. He touched the stone. He thought about Josephine, about page 12, about what she'd known about him before he knew it about himself. You were always supposed to be in the room. You were always supposed to be at the table. He thought about Naomi, about the first morning, the question she'd lobbed at him over orange juice like it was nothing. If you know something's wrong and nobody's asking you, is it still your job to say so? Yes. He was sensing yes. He took a breath, not to calm himself, to mark the moment, to stand in it fully before it became something that had already happened. The MC said his name. He walked out. 500 people. He stopped at the center of this, looked out. Didn't rush to speak, let the room see him first. He was wearing the shirt Naomi had pressed that morning. She'd insisted, dragged the iron out from under the bathroom sink, with a level of determination that suggested she'd been planning this specific intervention for some time. The shirt had one remaining faint stain near the hem that the iron hadn't touched because it had been there for 2 years and was beyond iron jurisdiction. He didn't care about the stain. He wasn't here to be polished. I used to clean this building. The room went quiet fast. Total silence.
Close.
The particular silence of a room that has decided collectively to pay attention. 5 nights a week, for 5 years. I came in after everyone left. I'd see what you left behind. He moved, slowly, not pacing, thinking out loud and covering ground at the same time. Not just the work, the worry. Whiteboards full of problems that people had pushed at for hours and hadn't gotten to do and had to go home and try again tomorrow. He stopped, reached into his pocket, unfolded paper, held up crayon copy paper, a dragon standing at the center of a maze, the colors bright even in the stage lighting, the dragon looking up at something outside the frame. My daughter drew this. She told me it was a dragon that doesn't know it's a dragon yet. It thinks it's something smaller, something that belongs closer to the ground. This for 3 months ago I walked into a conference room at 11:30 at night. 20 engineers had been working on a problem for 3 days. I looked at the whiteboard for maybe 5 minutes, and I saw it. He paused, not for effect, because it was still strange to say out loud. Not because I'm smarter than any of them, because I had nothing to protect, no position, no territory to defend. This was a reason to see what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. He looked out at the room, found Naomi in the front row, green dress, the small Lego dragon on her knee, her eyes on him, completely still, which was not her default state and meant she was in her most serious mode. Calvin beside her, hands folded. Something in his face that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. Found Diane at the back, standing, not sitting. Her arms were at her sides instead of folded, which he had started to understand was significant for her. A small thing, a real thing. She was looking at him the way she'd looked at him in the corner of a room at midnight, like she was finally seeing something she'd needed to see for a long time and was not going to look away with. He looked back at the room. This most expensive business isn't the wrong answer. He let it land. It's deciding in advance who's allowed to give the right one, and then building entire systems, hiring systems, access systems, floors to make sure everyone else stays quiet. Someone shifted in their seat. Swans leaned forward. I'm not asking you to go find the next me. I'm asking you to look at who's already in your building. He moved again. Who's been walking past your offices every night? Who sees your problems clearly because they're not invested in seeds as you've always solved them? Who's been near the exit for so long they've forgotten they were ever supposed to be at the table? He stopped. They're there. They've always been there. He looked out. The question is whether you're willing to see them before they stop believing it's worth being seen. He let the quiet be what it was. Then Deja Calloway stood up. 3rd row, tablet in her hand, clapping, not performing, just unsitting when standing felt more honest. Then Naomi stood up, obviously. Then the row behind them. Then like something tipping past a point of no return, the room. Not because of the algorithm, not because of the contract or the numbers or the percentage points on a graph. Because he had said a true thing in a room built for performance. And truth, even in expensive chairs, is louder than polish. Backstage was quieter. He stood with the curtain still warm behind him, the noise of the room fading into a murmur. His heart's doing something complicated that wasn't exactly adrenaline and wasn't exactly relief. It's probably the feeling of having been fully yourself in a high-stakes situation and survived it. Calvin appeared first, gripped his hand once. Said nothing, nodded. From Calvin that was a speech. Deja appeared right behind him, eyes bright. That particular energy she carried since something had gone exactly the way she'd calculated it would. Webb. Calloway. You didn't use a single piece of jargon. Nope. Not one, not one. She shook her head, half disbelief, half something that looked like admiration trying to stay professional. That thing you said, but the system's built to keep people quiet. She looked at him. I've been thinking about that since the first Tuesday you stood in the hall. I think I needed to hear it said out loud in a room that big. You were already thinking it. Yeah, but now 500 people heard it. She straightened, held out her hand. Lead technical engineer. To myself, apparently. He shook it. I've been ready. She said it without arrogance, just as a fact that had been true for a while and was now official. Go find your people, Webb. She went back toward her room. Then Naomi arrived at approximately his left knee. He caught her, lifted her up. She was definitely heavier than the last time he'd done this. He didn't mention it. You said the dragon thing, she said into Chauvel's shoulder. I did. You told them about me. I told them about you. Was it as embarrassing? Wait, for me or for you? She pulled back, looked at him with the evaluating expression. The serious one. For me, not remotely. She seemed satisfied, leaned her head back on his shoulder. The Lego dragon was still in her hand, pressed against his back. Yeah, we're humming before you went on. He went it from the front row. She sounded pleased about this. You do it when things are okay. He held it tighter for a moment. Then he heard hills on the floor behind him. Not rushing. Measured. The particular sound that he'd learned to distinguish from all the other sounds in a corporate building, because it was the sound of Diane Okafor moving through a space with intention. He put Naomi down. Naomi looked up at Diane, then at Marcus. Then she made a small sound, not impatient, just informed. I'm going to find Calvin, she announced. He promised me sparkling water, from the fancy kind with bubbles. She walked away with the dignity of someone who had completed her part in an arrangement and was leaving the rest to the relevant parties. They watched her go. Then it was just the two of them, backstage, with the murmur of the room on the other side of the curtain and the particular quiet as confessant in a finally arriving at its moment. You surprised me, Diane said. You've seen me in rooms before. Not like that one. She looked at him. You weren't so much imagining anyone's reaction. You weren't watching the room to see how I was landing. You were just there. Yeah. I forgot what that looked like. Someone just being there. Without the layer of she stopped. Performance, he said. Yes. He looked at her. At the coat she wore without armor underneath it now. At her arms at her sides. At the way she'd been stationing the back of the room, not managing the event, the calculating the outcome, just watching. I need to tell you something. She had prepared breakfast to say this. On the drive over. In the elevator up to the ballroom. In the 45 minutes she'd spent in the back of that room watching him. 6 different versions, each one a little cleaner, a little more controlled than the last. None of them came out. What came out instead was, I missed you. In the room. I missed you when you weren't there. Not the solution shits. Not the algorithm. You. The way the room feels different when you're in it. The way problems look different when you're looking at them. She held his gaze. I missed you. And I don't say that kind of thing. I've spent 4 years not saying that kind of thing. And I'm saying it now because I think not saying has cost me more than I've been willing to admit. The curtain behind them was stood slightly in front of me since some draft from the hallway. Raymond called me 3 times, she said. The day he died, I was in a closing meeting. I didn't know it was the last time. She said it the way she always said it now. Fast through it, the other side. I've been carrying that as proof that I choose wrong. That I pick the wrong thing when it matters. She looked at him. But I drove myself here tonight. I chose the back of that room. I didn't manage this event from the inside. I stood at the back and I watched you and I didn't look at my phone once. That's nothing, he said finally. For you.
No.
She almost smiled. It's not. He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the shoebox on the high shelf. About sitting on the closet floor with the journal in his hands and the weight of voice he'd been carrying for 4 years finally speaking back to him from the page. Keep on telling yourself. Do it for me if you can't do it for you yet. Sunday morning, he said. She blinked. What? Naomi has decided she wants to teach an adult to make pancakes. She's been building a case for it for 3 weeks. I've been saying we'll see. He looked at her. I says yes this week. She looked at him. If I warn you, I know you can't cook. Ouch. Perfectly adequate coffee. You made me hot brown water with ambition problems. She opened her mouth, closed it. He waited. Sunday, she said. Orange juice, no pop. I know. She said it like she'd known for a while and was mildly annoyed at being reminded. Which meant she'd been thinking about it. Which meant she'd been thinking about Sunday. Which? Almost smiled. Managed to keep it at almost. She turned to go back toward the room. Her room, now, in a different way than it had been before. She was part of what had happened here tonight. Part of what it meant. She stopped. Marcus.
Yeah.
Would have stood in the back of that room with me. He would have held my hand and watched you, and he would have been right. Said at her. He sounds like someone worth being right about, he said. She nodded once, then walked back toward the light and the noise. And 500 people who had, tonight, heard something they would carry with them for a while. He stood in the quiet for a moment, touched the stone in his pocket, then went to find his daughter. Sunday came the way sunshine comes in Atlanta in the early part of winter. Silver light through the blinds before the sun fully committed to the day. The smell of cold outside and something warm inside, and the particular peace of a morning that isn't in a hurry. Diane knocked at 8:03. The door opened before she'd fully lowered her hand. Naomi, in a t-shirt, said Quiet Operations Officer, and socks that today were both blue, which was a continuity to the possible intentional. Your 3 minutes, said Naomi. Said Trafk. It's Sunday. I stopped for orange juice. Naomi looked at the bag in her hand and processed this. That's Valentine. Commands. In the apartment. She knew it now. The way you learn a place after you've sat on its floor twice and helped reinforce its south wall and eaten food from counters, and once briefly held his coffee but discovered a spiral-bound journal with stars on the back, and understood that some things have weight that isn't about size. Marcus was in the kitchen, coffee already made. He looked up when she came in, and the look was easy, not kept, not careful, not managed, easy, which was newer than the Timoitis. Current thing is, Naomi has a system. I have a whole method, Naomi corrected, already pushing a step stool to the stove with the efficiency of a professional who has done this before. There are 3 stages. You're going to be in charge of stage 2. What's stage 2? Flip. Diane set the orange juice on the counter. I've been trusted with a flip. Says it's harder than it looks. Now Naomi says it seriously. Ask me how I know. How do you know? Stage 2 incident of 2023. We don't talk about it. She arranged the bowls with precision. But you're going to do fine. Marcus leaned against the counter and watched Naomi run through stage 1, the mixes, the measurements. She did have because she'd made this by now. The measuring cups were more ceremony than necessities. With this express of a man who had arrived somewhere he hadn't known he was heading and found something to be exactly right. He was humming, not loudly, barely, the way you hum when you don't know you're doing it. Diane heard it, didn't say anything, just heard it and filed it somewhere careful. The first batch was instructive. Naomi called it the learning batch and did not seem distressed by it. She added it to a plate labeled for scientific purposes and moved immediately to the second batch. Diane stood at the stove with the spatula, watched the edges, watched the bubbles. Not yet, Naomi said, without looking up from the bowl where she was preparing batch 3. There are bubbles. There aren't enough bubbles. The surface has to bubble, you'll know. The surface bubbled. Oops. She knew. She flipped. Perfect. She stared at it. Then she turned around. Marcus was watching, leaned against the counter, coffee in both hands. She looked at him. He raised his cup. It was such a small gesture, such an ordinary, unremarkable gesture in the context of a Sunday morning in a kitchen with a 6-year-old conducting pancake operations. She laughed, full, unplanned. The kind that surprised her with its own existence. The kind that had been waiting somewhere she hadn't been checking. Flip work, Naomi announced. I knew it would. I have an eye for potential. They ate at the kitchen table. The light through the window was fully gold now. The silver of early morning burned off. The city outside was Sunday quiet, slower, walking instead of rushing. A child on a bicycle on the sidewalk below, a particular rhythm of a day that had given itself permission to rest. Naomi presided over the meals with the satisfaction of someone who sang on schedule. She ate her stacked with methodical appreciation. She had opinions about syrup application and shared them freely. Marcus ate and watched and said little and wasn't present. Diane ate slowly. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten slowly. The pancakes were not complicated. They were flour and eggs and the right amount of patience and a 6-year-old who had decided that this morning was important and treated it accordingly. They were the best thing she'd eaten in a long time. After a while, Naomi set down her fork, looked at the table, at Marcus, at Diane, at the plates, at whatever calculation she was running in her head. "I'm going to check on the East Wing," she said. She slid off her chair, collected her plate, walked out, and as she went, she started humming. The same melody Marcus had been humming at the stove. The one that had no defined origin that either of them could name. It had just always been there, in the apartment, in the air, the way things pass from one person to another without being taught. She disappeared into her room. The humming continued through the wall. The kitchen was quiet. Marcus looked at the door she could dawned coin through. Send that exit down to the fork. And Diane looked at her coffee. She texted me Wednesday. She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Sunday is for the true things. Don't be late with the juice." He stared at the door. She'd 6 3/4. 3/4 doesn't, it really doesn't explain it, no. He looked at her. She looked at him. And in the room between them, the ordinary kitchen room, with its used mugs and its stack of nearly ripened pancakes, window full of sunlight.
Settled, not dramatically.
Not with the weight of announcement. Just settled. The way things do when they've been working toward a place for a while and finally arrive. He reached across the table. Not a gesture. Not a moment. Just a man extending his hand across a kitchen table towards something he had spent a long time believing he wasn't allowed to want. She looked at his hand, looked at him, put her hand in his. Outside, the city moved through its Sunday, unhurried, alive. Inside, Naomi hummed through the wall. Marcus felt for the sounds of his own apartment, his own morning, his own life, and understood something he had been working toward for 4 years. He was not near the exit. He was not invisible. He was not making himself smaller so the room could breathe easier. He was here, in his kitchen, with his daughter humming through the wall and a woman's hand in his and the last of the good pancakes on the plate between them. All of his. All of it earned, not by becoming someone else, by finally completely refusing to be anyone less than himself. Somewhere in the apartment, the Lego city waited, the East Wing unfinished, the yellow piece, the impractical one, the one that made it real, glowing at the center of a thing still being built. Plenty left to build. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus Webb was not afraid of what came next. He was ready for it.